Welcome to Understory Files. Every crime leaves evidence. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's hidden, and sometimes it doesn't even look like evidence at all. Because in today's world, the most powerful witness isn't always a person. Sometimes it's data, silent, invisible, constantly recording. This story begins with what investigators initially believed was the perfect crime. No forced entry, no witnesses, no surveillance footage, and most importantly, no digital trail, at least. That's what the killer believed. Because after the crime was committed, something very deliberate happened. The app was deleted, the account was wiped, the device was discarded. From the outside, it looked clean, careful, calculated, like someone who understood exactly how modern investigations work. Someone who knew that in 2026, digital footprints are often more powerful than fingerprints. And someone who believed they had erased theirs completely, but what they didn't understand was that the data didn't disappear. It was still there, waiting, not in the cloud, not on the phone, but inside the device itself. What investigators would later call ghost data. The case began quietly. A body discovered inside a residential home. No immediate signs of a break-in. No clear suspect. Just a timeline that didn't make sense. Neighbors reported nothing unusual. No loud noises. No disturbance. It was as if the event had happened without leaving a trace. And that's exactly what made it suspicious. Because crimes that leave no trace usually mean someone tried very hard to remove them. Investigators began building a timeline. Who had access, who had motive, who had opportunity. And one name quickly surfaced. A person who appeared cooperative, calm, confident. Someone who provided an alibi almost immediately. They claimed they had been at home, asleep, for hours. No movement, no activity, no reason to question it. And at first, it held. There were no messages, no calls, no location data linking them to the scene. It looked airtight. Until investigators found something small. Something almost insignificant. A fitness tracker. It wasn't even on the suspect. It belonged to the victim. A wearable device designed to monitor heart rate, steps, and movement. The kind of device millions of people wear every day without thinking twice. At first, it didn't seem relevant. But then someone asked a simple question. What if the device recorded something? Because while people can lie, data doesn't. When investigators accessed the account, they discovered something strange. The data had been deleted, completely wiped from the cloud, which at first seemed like a dead end. But that's when the case took a turn. Because in 2026, deletion doesn't always mean destruction. And someone on the forensic team knew exactly where to look next. Not in the cloud, but inside the hardware. They extracted the local memory from the device, and what they found changed everything. Fragments of data, time-stamped, incomplete, but enough to reconstruct what happened. This wasn't normal data. It wasn't clean, it wasn't organized. It was what investigators began calling ghost data, residual information left behind after deletion. Pieces of a digital story that someone thought was gone forever. And within that ghost data, they found the first anomaly. A spike. A sudden, intense increase in heart rate. Not from the victim, but from the person wearing the device during the critical time window, because at some point, the tracker had switched users, or more accurately, someone else had interacted with it. And that's when the timeline began to break apart. According to the suspect, they were asleep, motionless, inactive, but the data told a different story. At the exact time of the incident, there was movement, significant movement. Not just a few steps. Thousands, over 2,000 steps recorded in a short window. That's not sleep. That's activity. And not just normal activity. Fast, erratic, high-intensity movement. The kind of movement that doesn't happen in a resting state. The kind that happens during stress, during adrenaline, during struggle. Investigators looked deeper. And the deeper they went, the more the alibi collapsed. Because alongside the step data, there was location data. Not full GPS tracking, but fragments, pings, enough to map a path that started near the suspect's claimed location and moved rapidly toward the victim's residence, then stopped, right at the scene, and during that time, the heart rate data told its own story. A steady baseline, then suddenly a sharp spike, a peak, far beyond normal resting levels. This wasn't exercise. This wasn't routine movement. This was stress, physical exertion, the kind your body experiences when something intense is happening, something your body reacts to, even if you try to hide it. And that's when investigators realized something critical. They weren't just looking at data. They were looking at physiology, at the human body responding in real time. Because while a person can create an alibi, their body cannot fake its biological response. And this was the beginning of the unraveling. Because the more data they recovered, the clearer the picture became. The suspect wasn't asleep. They were active, moving, traveling, and eventually arriving at the exact location where the crime occurred. What had been presented as a perfect alibi was now being dismantled step by step, beat by beat, data point by data point, and this was just the beginning. Because the deeper layers of the data would reveal something even more precise. Something investigators would later describe as the digital signature of the crime itself. And this is where the case moved from suspicious to undeniable, because the next layer of data didn't just suggest movement, it mapped behavior. Investigators began reconstructing the timeline using every fragment of recovered biometric information. Step counts, heart rate variability, elevation changes, micro movements stored in the device's internal sensors. Each one on its own meant very little, but together they formed a pattern that could not be ignored. One of the most critical discoveries came from what investigators later called the step count conflict. During the exact time window when the suspect claimed to be asleep, the device recorded over 2,000 steps. Not scattered throughout the day, not gradual. Condensed into a tight window of time, which meant one thing: sustained movement, consistent, directional, purposeful. And when investigators aligned those steps with the recovered location pings, the path became clear. From the suspect's location to the victim's home. Then movement inside the structure itself, because the next layer of data revealed something even more precise. Elevation shifts. Small but measurable changes. The kind that occur when someone moves up or downstairs, step by step, floor to floor. Investigators compared those elevation changes with the layout of the victim's home, and what they found was a near-perfect match. The data aligned with the staircase, the rooms, the movement through the house. At this point, the evidence wasn't just circumstantial. It was structural. It mirrored the physical environment of the crime scene. And there was the heart rate. Because while steps tell you where someone moved, heart rate tells you what they were experiencing. At the start of the timeline, the readings were normal, baseline, resting. Then came the shift. A rapid increase, sharp, sudden. A spike that didn't match walking, didn't match running, didn't match exercise patterns. It matched adrenaline, the kind of spike that happens when the body enters a fight or flight state. When stress overrides control, when the body reacts before the mind can explain it. Investigators referred to this moment as the biometric peak because it occurred at the exact point where the timeline suggested the confrontation happened. Not before, not after. At the exact moment, and that's what made it powerful. Because it wasn't just data. It was timing, precise, unforgiving, and impossible to fake. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a biological reaction recorded in real time, a moment the suspect couldn't erase, even after deleting everything else. And that's when investigators realized something critical. The killer hadn't just left evidence behind. They had carried it with them. Inside a device they thought they had wiped clean. Inside data they believed was gone forever, but the mistake was assuming deletion meant disappearance, because in modern digital forensics, data doesn't vanish. It fragments, it hides. It lingers in places most people don't even know exist. Inside local caches, temporary storage, residual memory, and with the right tools, it can be brought back, reconstructed, replayed. Investigators used advanced recovery tools to rebuild the timeline second by second. And what emerged was not just a sequence of events, it was a story. A digital reconstruction of movement, stress, and behavior. A story told not through words, but through biology. And it contradicted everything the suspect had claimed. Because while the suspect said they were asleep, the data showed movement. While they claimed stillness, the data showed travel. While they claimed distance, the data placed them at the scene. And that contradiction became the turning point. Because once the digital timeline was established, everything else began to align. The physical evidence, the location, the timing, all matching the biometric data, piece by piece, until there was no longer a gap, no uncertainty, no alternative explanation. And that's when the case shifted from investigation to prosecution. In court, the evidence was presented carefully, not as abstract data, but as a narrative. A timeline that jurors could follow, a sequence they could understand, because the power of this case wasn't just in the technology, it was in the clarity, the simplicity, movement recorded, heart rate captured, steps counted. A story told through numbers that couldn't lie. And when that story was shown, the impact was immediate, because for the first time, the truth was undeniable. The jury wasn't just hearing about the crime, they were seeing it unfold through data, through patterns, through the body's own response, and that made it real. In a way words alone never could. The defense argued against the interpretation, questioned the accuracy, raised concerns about how the data was recovered. But the consistency was undeniable. Every layer supported the same conclusion. Every metric pointed in the same direction. And in the end, that digital evidence became the foundation of the case, the deciding factor, the silent witness that couldn't be cross-examined, because it wasn't human. It didn't forget. It didn't change its story. It simply recorded. And when the verdict was delivered, it reflected that the conviction was secured. Not through eyewitnesses, not through confessions, but through data. Through a digital footprint that refused to disappear. And that's what makes this case different, because it represents something larger, a shift in how crimes are investigated, in how truth is uncovered, and in how the human body itself has become part of the evidence. Today, devices track everything: steps, heart rate, sleep patterns, location, constantly, quietly, without interruption. Most people see it as convenience, as health tracking, as routine. But cases like this reveal something else, that these devices don't just track life, they record it in ways that can't always be erased, in ways that can outlive intention, outlast deletion, and ultimately tell the story someone tried to hide. This is the new reality, where your digital footprint isn't just what you post, it's what your body records, every movement, every reaction, every moment. Stored somewhere, waiting, and sometimes becoming the only witness left. This is Understory Files, and beneath every perfect crime there's always something that remains, even when you think it's gone. If you want more stories that uncover the hidden layers behind modern investigations, subscribe to Understory Files, because the truth doesn't disappear. It just waits to be found. And we'll see you in the next story.